Hello, I'm Matt Forde and welcome to Unspun. Before we start, let me reassure you that if anyone on the show does feel ill, they will stay until the end. With the general election only hours away, what's been happening over the past few days? An enormous effigy of Theresa May flicking the V sign towards Europe appeared on the White Cliffs of Dover. Two-dimensional, stiff and highly unstable, Theresa May is still the bookies' favourite to win tomorrow's election. Stephen Hawking has sensationally backed Labour to win the election. Previously considered to be one of the most intelligent men in the world, his announcement has raised the suspicion that Hawking has been hacked by the Russians. And having gone round the entire office, one man still can't think what to write on Sadiq Khan's birthday card. Still to come on Unspun, our US correspondent, Apala Nancherla, will be here in the studio, and later on, I'll be joined by one of the all-time stars of the Conservative Party, Anne Widdecombe. As always, my house band of politicians and guest musicians are here. They'll wake you up before you go, because it's polling day and they need every vote they can get. It's MP4. As you know, Kev, Greg and Pete are in their constituencies, wondering if they'll have a job tomorrow. So, standing in for them tonight, we have, on drums from the Kaiser Chiefs, VJ Mystery. On bass, also from the Kaiser Chiefs, Simon Ricks. On mouth organ, ex-Lib Dem MP, Lembit Opek. On keys from Clock Opera, it's Guy Connolly. And on guitar, ex-Labour MP and Unspun's very own Ian Causey. There's just a day to go before we elect our next government. In the wake of the attacks on Britain, the focus has understandably been on security.
The Prime Minister has been accused of cutting police numbers during her time as Home Secretary.
Mrs May refused to say whether she would reverse the cuts, instead accusing the Labour leader of failing to support anti-terrorism measures.
Labour have attacked the Conservatives for cutting the numbers of police in England and Wales by 13% between 2010 and 2016. That's nearly 19,000 fewer officers. Despite Theresa May's best efforts, she didn't cut enough of them to stop Craig McKinley being charged with alleged election fraud. But cuts are only half of the story. The Prime Minister points to an extra £3.4 billion in counter-terror spending. So, there are fewer police under the Tories, but there's more resource for fighting terrorism. Or, to put it more positively, we've cut police numbers, but the ones that are left are not to be fucked with. Yeah, we can get your cat out of the tree, but it will be with a controlled explosion. As the row intensified, Jeremy Corben made a bold demand.
Given her record on policing numbers, there have been calls for her resignation. Would you back those calls?
Indeed, I would.
Jeremy, there's an election tomorrow. That is literally what it's for. Of course, if he really wants Theresa May to disappear, he should just challenge her to a debate. The Labour leader then clarified his position just hours later.
You think she should resign?
No, I think we should vote on Thursday to decide who our MPs are and decide who our government is going to be.
He fell apart quicker than a claim on Paul Nuttall's CV. Of course, it's ridiculous to expect a leading politician to step aside in the days before an election, right? Jeremy Corbyn campaigning chaos as Diane Abbott replaced. Now, obviously, we all hope that Diane is OK, but I'm not surprised she feels unwell. She's been in 2 car crashes in this campaign. She was asked what her temperature was, but couldn't remember the figures. Diane's had some tough interviews during this election, so she must have been a little jealous of the easy treatment Theresa May was given by ITV's Tonight programme.
What's the naughtiest thing you ever did?
Oh, goodness me.
Cut police numbers?
I have to confess, when me and my friends sort of used to run through the fields of wheat, the farmers weren't too pleased about that.
She makes Jacob Rees-Mogg look like Danny Dyer. I mean, to be fair, what did we expect? Yes, I used to run through fields of wheat. I don't think the farmer was very happy about it, but probably because we killed all the cows. As I said at the time, no veal is better than a bad veal. Tim Farron was keen to outline his solution to Britain's security issues on Question Time. The only problem is, it sounded more like he was pitching an idea for a new TV show.
What we have at the moment, if you like, is a ever-widening haystack, and we're looking for a needle. And the answer is not to put more hay into the haystack, it is to put more magnets around the haystack so we can actually find what's in there in the first place.
Tim Farron's idea, therefore, I'm a needle in a haystack, get me out of here. UKIP have walked a fine line since the terror attacks, unsure of quite how far they can go. When discussing British values on Sunday night, Paul Nuttall almost gets bogged down in a discussion about internment, but then Paul has a brainwave.
They need to be told, and it needs to be made clear, you're in Britain and you sign up to British way of life.
And internment is the answer, is it?
No, I didn't say that. No, I'm talking about internment. I also mentioned waterboarding, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not an animal. I torture them as well. The irony is, of course, that waterboarding involves covering the face, so would be illegal under a UKIP government. The Green Party co-leader Jonathan Bartley has been promoting their policy on electoral reform. He asked us to imagine a world under proportional representation.
Can you imagine, in 2015, according to our vote share, under a fair voting system, we would have had 24 MPs in the House of Commons. Imagine 24 Caroline Lucases.
Yeah, I think that's what puts people off. The SNP are riding high in the polls, but facing a resurgent Conservative Party in Scotland. That pressure caused Nicola Sturgeon to perform the U-turn of the century.
When we get to the end of that Brexit process and we can see what the implications are for the future of our country, we should have a choice. Do we think that is acceptable and right for Scotland, or do we want to choose a different future? Because fundamentally, our future should be decided for us, not by us.
What a turnaround! If she keeps contradicting SNP policy at this rate, she'll start improving education. We couldn't talk about the last rush for votes without mentioning our very own Greg Knight. Some of you may be aware that our usual drummer with MP4 went viral earlier this week with his campaign video.
We want a strong and stable government, not a coalition of chaos led by Jeremy Corbyn.
You'll get accountability with Conservative delivery.
See what happens when you go solo? We've been in touch with Greg about it, and I'm not saying it's old, but when I told him he'd gone viral, he thought he had to go to hospital. Fellas, Ian, first and foremost, as Greg's bandmate, what was he thinking?
I'm not absolutely certain what Greg was thinking when he did that, but all it lacked was the aha! And it would have been absolutely perfect. Although, the thing I think is the biggest crime, he's been using the same election song since 1970.
But have you ever released a video like that for any of your campaigns?
Not exactly like that. So I did speak to Greg last night and I said, remember, some politicians do videos that nobody ever watches, so we should be pleased. There are millions watching him.
We should indeed. Ian, thank you very much. For decades, the space race has been dominated by the US and Russia. Well, not anymore. India have gained global recognition for their space programme and last year put over 200 people into space. 3 in the cockpit with the rest hanging on the outside. For more on this story, we're going to catch up with our Asia correspondent. When it comes to getting to the truth, he's no chicken. Balls to the rest of them. This is Phil Wang.
Thank you, Matt. Are Asia the only place with more dongs in it than your aunt's Tinder account? I'm Phil Wang, and this is Asia News. India's space agency has successfully launched its heaviest ever rocket, weighing the same as 200 elephants, 5 jumbo jets, or your dad after a Nando's. The launch was a homegrown Indian project and cost only £6 million, which is extremely cheap by international standards. But then again, they did outsource to India. India has, however, been criticised for spending money on space projects when nearly a quarter of its population live below its official poverty limit. But at least they now also live below some kick-ass satellites. A naked school has opened in Japan. The Hinodeu bathhouse in Tokyo is attracting new customers by offering to teach classes to them while they wash, because Japan. Classes will cover topics such as comedy, gaming, and how to clean this part here, you know, just like under. It's like under, but it's also above. Communal hot baths are a Japanese tradition, and by continuing to run its baths, Hinodeu is proudly keeping alive a lot of bacteria. In cricket news, India have won their first match in the Champions Trophy, defeating Pakistan. The international community breathes a sigh of relief as that rivalry is finally put to rest. In other cricket news, grasshoppers suck. The Indian cricket team won because they had more runs than Pakistan. Not surprising, their food is spicier. Now, I'm no expert on the game myself, but from what I can gather, cricket is basically baseball for the colonies that stayed in the empire long enough to learn patience. I'm Phil Wang for Unspun. 我去上学了.
Thanks, Phil. I'll be back after a quick break when I'll be getting a live update from the President of the United States himself. Welcome back to Unspun. Donald Trump's cuddly Secretary of State for Defence, James Mad Dog Mattis, recently revealed that the US had accelerated its tactics against ISIS, moving from a policy of attrition to one of annihilation. If that didn't sound menacing enough, Mad Dog made a startling confession on American TV.
What keeps you awake at night?
Nothing. I keep other people awake at night.
I guarantee that if you take one thing away from this show, it will be nightmares about James Mad Dog Mattis. We don't need to worry about Mad Dog, though, as we've got his boss.
Thank you all. We live in troubled times. And when the world is divided, you know what we need? More division. Works for me. I've been having a war of words with this guy, Sadiq Khan. He doesn't respond to my tweets, so I guess Sadiq can't. So you can use that. You can follow me on Twitter, by the way, at Real Donald Trump. I'm on Snapchat too, but that's just for Ivanka. Anyway, Sadiq, he's the mayor of London, took over from Dick Whittington. And because of Sadiq, I put an immediate ban on bus drivers and their sons coming into America. I had to. 'Cause you know what they say? You wait for one bus driver and his son, and then 3 turn up at once. He won't stop me going to London, though. I've already accepted an invitation for a state visit, and I can't wait to meet the royals, David and Victoria. I admire all the people of London, and I hear many of them have joined a brave resistance movement called the London Underground. You can always count on them, although I hear they're less reliable at weekends. And I know London so well, and all its beautiful places. Albert Square, the red post box where Danger Mouse lives, and the beautiful train station that they named Paddington Bear after. I forget what it's called. The Londoners have been a true inspiration to the world, especially the dude who kept his beer when leaving the bar, although I'm told that happens a lot in Britain anyway. And although in Manchester we saw great spirit, there's still a long way to go to heal long-standing divisions. So Liam and Noel, if you're listening, kiss and make up, guys. We all want Oasis back. Big issues, folks. There is a need to bring people together. And this is how we're going to do it, by the way. 2 words, travel ban. There's a big demand for a travel ban wherever I go. People say, please, stop him coming here. And I go anyway. Thank you very much. Good night.
To discuss America in more detail, we usually speak to her via satellite, so I'm delighted that for the first time she's right here in the studio. It's our US correspondent, Apala Nancherla. Apala, welcome to the show.
Matt, it is so nice to actually be here, and not just because, you know, my country is complete shit show right now.
Indeed. What coverage has our election been getting in America?
Oh, that's a great question, and I will answer it with my own question. What coverage? I had to learn about your election the old-fashioned way from reading a newspaper here in London. The last government-related UK news I read in the States was about how our president, and I use that term very loosely, is trying to start a Twitter war with your mayor over the handling of the recent terrorist attack. Luckily, your mayor knows how to use the block button. And also, he doesn't conduct the majority of his governing over Twitter.
We had quite detailed coverage of your election in this country. Why do you think the reverse isn't true?
Oh, that's easy. The motto of the American news media is basically, is it about us? No? Can you make it about us? No? Then why are you telling me this? Like, the United States as an abbreviation spells us. That's not a coincidence. The only time we bring up international news is if we can twist it to make it about ourselves. I'll give you 3 examples. 1, World War I. 2, World War II. And 3 would be the next World War, but there won't be one, thanks to old Trumpty Dumpty pulling out of the Paris Agreement. There won't be a world at all. So thoughtful of him.
Did Brexit get much coverage in America?
You know, Brexit actually did get coverage in America about a year ago, but that's because it happened before our presidential election. We basically use Brexit as a metaphor for the rise of the populist right in our own country, aka Trump. Now, I'm not arguing that Boris Johnson and Trump are the same person, though I would say their hair is the same. Wind is definitely the #1 enemy of both of those men. But yeah, we still got a ton of opinion pieces along the lines of if it could happen there, it could happen here. And, you know, nothing runs the presses like fear and paranoia.
Yes, and once again, it's about you.
Yeah, and, you know, since we're so committed, it actually did happen to us. And that's why, as of November 8th, 2016, we are too busy putting out the nonstop garbage fires coming out of our president's mouth to pay attention to anything else. Which would also probably explain why Trump is opposed to slowing down climate change by reducing toxic emissions, because that's pretty much all he produces.
Did Americans follow the French presidential election at all?
We did follow the French election, but that's because it was, how do you say, very French. Like the Nazi-sympathizing Marine Le Pen versus the level-headed ingenue Emmanuel Macron with the toothpaste ad smile, and then Macron wins. I mean, that's just good television. Like, I don't know, like Marine Le Pen sounds like the name of a Disney villain. Like I'm 100% confident she wears long fur coats made out of Dalmatians. I don't know, in her case, French poodles.
You've been through your election in America. What advice can you give us going through ours?
Well, I am happy to come here today representing the ghost of election future. And because it is too late for me, I would just urge everyone to please vote. I know it's not as exciting as the next episode of Game of Thrones or whatever, and there definitely won't be as much nudity involved. But just do it. Like, if you do vote, you can at least prevent your country from ending up in another Hunger Games scenario. Though, I don't know, I don't hate the idea of a British guy in a loincloth.
Apala, it's been a real treat to have you here in the studio with us.
Me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Apala Nancherla. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Thank you. Imagine for a moment you're at the World Soil Serving Championships, about to watch the final of the team event. They still wouldn't dish as much dirt as these guys.
I think there are too many to mention to you, madam.
I was presenting an award at a rural show and a horse started to eat my hair. And this woman comes over and asks for my name. She's sort of checking out, you know, what my constituency is, and I tell her, Joe Swinson, and she says, I'm Harriet, and I said, oh, Harriet who? And she says, Harriet Harman, which was embarrassing enough, but then I followed it up with, oh yes, I've seen you on the telly.
I made the mistake of trying to get my very young son on a TV interview where they were following me around with a camera. To say something, and I said, what do you think about Tony Blair? And he looked at the camera and he went, he's boring, boring, boring.
Well, there's often all sorts of skullduggery goes on.
Someone opened the gate to go to someone's house, and the gate kind of broke off in their hand. So they kind of propped the gate up next to the gatepost, put the Conservative literature away, got out a Labour literature, put that through the letterbox, in the hope the owner would assume that a Labour person had broken their gate rather than Conservative.
The staged photographs, I think, which most people can see through.
It seems very set up, and I always think that it's good for politicians to go out and engage in a kind of more natural environment.
They stage the fly tipping to complain about mess, you know. That's just not on as far as I'm concerned.
We knocked on this bloke's door on a Sunday morning, and he leaned out and said, clear off! And he said, what's that? Said, I'm fast asleep, how dare you wake me up, you effing, blah, blah, blah. And so Coleman said, excuse me, sir, we're from the Conservative Party. And I said, yes, jolly well get out of bed. I expect you sleep in a vest, you look like that sort of chap, and get down and vote Conservative on Thursday. And I said, well, sod the lot of you, just for that, I'm going to bloody vote Labour.
Ian, you've campaigned for the Labour Party for years and years and through many general elections. What's been your most embarrassing moment on the campaign trail?
I once met some people because there'd been a company closed down and they'd left a big derelict site which people get very annoyed about. They came to see me and I said, you know, what a disgrace the landowner was, what a disgrace the business was, and it was terrible. And then I realised that's who I was talking to.
So how'd you get out of that?
Well, I sort of seamlessly moved on to, I realised planning regulations make these things difficult. But I think it's fair to say he didn't vote for me.
True of a lot of people in that constituency, though, Ian. So
the majority, yes.
Alice, thank you very much. Still to come on this election special Unspun, our analyst Andy Zaltzman will be here, and later on I'll be interviewing one of the most unconventional stars of Strictly Come Dancing and Celebrity Fit Club, Anne Widdecombe. Welcome back. Now it's time for the Unspun guide on how to win an election. You've been torn a new one by Andrew Neil, performed 3 U-turns and exposed yourself as an enumerate fool. There's just one chance left. Today I'm going to show you how to win on polling day. The polls open at 7 a.m, so the day has to start nice and early with a good morning leaflet delivered to your supporters' houses. Here's one that the Lib Dems use. Quite a pleasant thing to see in the morning. It's a friendly reminder. These become progressively less pleasant as the days go on. Parties work through lists of people who promised they would vote for them, so they know whose houses to focus on. Bear in mind, while some will be in and some will be out, lots will be pretending to be out, so keep knocking until they answer. It might seem more efficient just to use a loudhailer to get everyone up and out, but maybe not. Labour List's handy guide to a successful polling day has this hint. Untargeted campaigning, such as use of loudhailers, wakes up opposition voters. Not only that, they're likely to alienate your own supporters too, on the grounds that they're fucking annoying. Once you've got people out of bed, you then have to do anything to get them to the polling station, including offering lifts in a car. It is illegal to offer a lift in return for a vote, but not illegal to offer a lift at all. So, if I just happened to be giving Mrs Scroggins a lift to vote on polling day, it was simply out the goodness of my heart, officer. But there's a risk. You don't know much about the people you're now driving to the polling stations. What if they're reckless, or even worse, drunk? While there are no rules against voting when you're drunk or high, if the presiding officer suspects you're incapable of voting, they may ask you a series of questions to see if you're up to the task, which could be a catch-22. Are you drunk? No. Who are you thinking of voting for? UKIP. He's shit-faced. Get him out of there. Once the clock strikes 10 p.m, the voting is over and the counting begins in a place befitting the magnitude of British democracy. A sweaty sports hall. Ah, democracy and pants. Elections can still be won and lost at this point. In this year's local elections in South Blythe, the candidates were level after 2 recounts, so the contest was decided by drawing straws. Lib Dem candidate Leslie Rickaby drew the long straw and won. Although, now that she has to sit in council meetings for 5 years, she arguably drew the short straw. So to avoid losing your seat by chance, you need to use everything to your advantage, including spoilt ballot papers. It's long been believed in Britain that if you don't put a cross in the box of the candidate you want, your vote doesn't count. This is completely untrue. According to the Electoral Commission, returning officers will accept anything they believe is a clear indication of support. This can be a tick, the word yes, or even a smiley face. When a ballot is spoiled, each party's agent will be allowed to argue that it's a vote for them. So, be prepared to claim that markings like this are clear indications of support for your candidate. And use whatever argument you can to win. For example, well, it's clearly a vote for me because the sperm is impregnating the Lib Dem box. If you can convince a returning officer to count that one for your candidate, you need to run for Parliament yourself because you're a political genius. And that is how you win on polling day. When you vote in the general election tomorrow, you'll be using the first-past-the-post system. It's controversial, mainly because it prevents smaller parties from getting more seats. But then, so do their manifestos. If you thought electoral reform couldn't get any sexier, then brace yourself for our analyst, Andy Zaltzman. Andy, what are you doing?
Just practising for tomorrow, Matt. Don't want to balls it up on the big day.
No. And what are you doing now?
Well, now, Matt, I am recreating the sensation of voting in a safe seat. I mean, sure, any vote is fun, but it has about as much democratic impact as unicycling to the North Pole, facing south and going, the government, grrr.
So, you're not a fan of first past the post, then?
No, Matt, I'm not, because I'm also not a fan of massively misrepresenting the democratic will of people at elections.
That's not your thing?
No, I prefer cricket. It's binary either-or choice, isn't it, really? Look, I admit first-past-the-post is unarguably a very good system for deciding some things. For example, horse races.
It is awesome for that.
Amen, sister. Way better than most legs.
Or sexiest nay.
Testify. Yep.
On the plus side, first past the post does give us direct local representation.
Yeah, which is lovely, and would be even lovelier if we didn't also have a second chamber in which all 800 members are elected by, just let me do the maths quickly, 0.0% of the voting population. And we live in a fast-moving, fast-changing, super fastly fast 21st century world. It's very fast. But our electoral system has all the flexibility and dynamism of an arthritic, fossilised snooker table. The worst kind of snooker table. It stifles and stagnates our politics.
Is that a strength or a weakness or both?
Yes, it's all three of those things. But if we are going to keep first past the post, Matt, we should have the courage of our democratic convictions and apply the same principle and logic across all areas of public life. In particular, jury trials, where you should be able to convict a defendant on a 3-9 minority verdict, provided that 4 of those 9 simply could not be asked to turn up to court, and the remaining 5 thought the defendant was definitely innocent, but for a range of slightly different reasons.
Are there any other similarly outdated technologies you think we should bring back?
Well, absolutely, Matt. Who needs email? When you have that.
A carrier pigeon?
Yeah. Look. Fly away, my pretty. Off to Nigeria to collect my millions. Modern birth control, no thank you. This was doing the job just fine. And the NHS, I don't think so. Let Mother Nature do its job. And above which, these little chaps won't ever go on strike. Problem solved. You're welcome.
Andy, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Zaltzman. Don't go anywhere, because after the break, I'll be joined by the star of Celebrity Antiques Roadshow, where she was valued at nearly £4 million, Anne Widdecombe. Welcome back to Unspun. Now it's time for my special guest. She rose to fame in the mid-90s as Prisons Minister under John Major and gained a reputation for being one of the Conservatives' toughest politicians. In later years, she softened her image with appearances on Louis Theroux and a variety of reality TV shows. Please welcome a legend of British politics, Anne Widdecombe. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. You're the only one who didn't mention that reality show by name, so I thought I'd just remind them what...
Keep the brand alive. You've gone, Anne, from being one of the toughest Tories, really, there was in the 90s to being quite a sort of soft and gentle reality TV star. Have you drifted left, do you think, in your 80 years?
Have you never read my column in The Express? Every Wednesday, very good column.
I've read it occasionally, yes. I was being slightly provocative.
And you think I may have drifted to the left having read my column?
No, I just thought, well, you've softened your image somewhat, and I thought maybe you'd mellowed a bit.
No. This is a question of perception. When you're an MP, there are some things you can't do, like pantomime. At least not paid pantomime. So there are some things you can't do. It would be totally wrong to do them. But when you're no longer an MP, you have no obligations whatever to take decisions as if you were. And so then you can open up to all these other things, which is what I've done. So I haven't changed. It's just I've now got an opportunity that it wouldn't have been appropriate to take before.
And in terms of where the Conservatives are positioned now, are they positioned in the right spot, do you think, or are they a bit too close to the centre, or a bit further to the right?
Well, it's almost impossible to classify any party as... Well, actually, it's not with Jeremy Corbyn's at the moment. But usually it is impossible to classify any party as being right, left, centre. The fact is some policies will be perceived as right of centre, some left of centre, some centre. And really, it's a rather slovenly shorthand, this, you know, are you right or you left? Because the answer will nearly always be you're a mixture, depending on what the policies are.
Because on certain things, you're arguably to the left of Theresa May on things like animal rights and fox hunting.
Oh, I certainly don't approve of, you know, the pledge to reverse... Well, she hasn't said to reverse the ban, to have a vote on reversing the ban. And actually, I don't know very many hunters who are either. I mean, most people say now, you know, that's old hat. There are rather more important things to think about. I mean, you know, there are small things. There's a war in Syria. There's starvation in East Africa. There's a lunatic with his finger on the nuclear button in North Korea. You know, so I said North Korea. I really wouldn't worry too much about repealing the ban on fox hunting.
No, and it's had a lot of opposition from inside government, mainly from Liam Fox, who I gather is petrified at the thought of fox hunting coming back. You've always had, well, not always had, but with some colleagues had quite a colourful relationship, and the most famous one really is Michael Howard.
Ah, yes.
Who you once said had something of the night about him.
I wasn't spelling it with a K either.
What was it about him that you didn't like?
When I said that at the time, I didn't need to explain it, because everybody said, oh, yes. I mean, it just struck a chord. Now, it would be very laborious to have to explain it all again, but if people are desperately interested, there's a 40-minute speech in Hansard in May 1997, May the 19th, which you can look up and you can read if you're desperate.
I probably have read it, but that says more about me, perhaps. How did he take it?
Well, I doubt if he was particularly pleased about it. But the fact is, a year later, we were both in the same shadow cabinet and we did manage to work together. You don't have to be lovey-dovey in order to work efficiently together. And we did work as part of the same team. But, no, people often say, well, what do we say when we pass each other in corridors? And we say, good morning, good evening, goodbye.
That's about it. You both served, as you say, in William Hague's shadow cabinet, and that was a very difficult period for the Conservative Party after...
It was.
After the 1997 election result, really then the foregone conclusion of 2001. During that period, William Hague was really one of the stars of Parliament, and his sort of personal qualities weren't perhaps appreciated by the British public.
Well, interestingly, they weren't at the time. But then, as so often happens, once he ceased to be leader of the party, then quite suddenly he was regarded very seriously indeed. And that is quite often a politician's fate. I mean, you say I've mellowed. Actually, I haven't changed at all. But I've left office, so everybody thinks I've mellowed.
But would he ever say to you, you know, oh, Anne, I'm trying my best to turn the party around and I don't know what to do?
Yes, that's better than Rory Bremner.
I'll put that on my poster, thank you very much. But you, as you say, you left the pantomime of politics, but you're literally doing pantomime this year.
Yes, I am. I mean, and last year and the year before. I mean, we talked about foxes just now. 2 years ago, I was on at Windsor with Basil Brush.
And did you have...
He was very pleased with the stand that I took on hunting in the house.
Did you have anything else politically in common with Basil?
Not that I noticed. The thing about Basil was, you see, he never quite spoke for himself. Whereas I always spoke for myself.
And one of the questions we put to our MPs earlier was, what's the naughtiest thing they've ever done? Well, in fact, it was the question put to Theresa May. What's the naughtiest thing she'd ever done?
She ran through a wheat field.
Yeah. What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
Well, it wasn't running through a wheat field. When I was at boarding school, 2 of us dressed up as ghosts. And we put sheets over ourselves and we walked through the convent. And we met a nun and she nearly had a heart attack. So I suppose that was quite a naughty thing to do.
And then there was another girl in the class called Theresa May, and you chased her out of the school and through this field of wheat. And to this day, she's looked harrowed ever since. Anne, I'm sorry to say that's all we've got time for, but it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us.
I thought there was a general election happening.
Oh, there is, but we're just going to... We're going to sort of...
We're not going to talk about it.
Well, we are. We're going to do the end now, and then we're going to come back and do a couple of... It's just for the timing of the show, you see. So I will ask you a couple of...
And you say politicians aren't logical.
Yeah. Well, no, but you raised a very good point, and I'm more than happy to give way to the honourable lady. So in terms of this election campaign, then, Anne...
Well, I've just gone. We've just wound up.
Let's pretend that you're still here. It's amazing how panto-ready you are.
Oh, yes, I
am. So in terms of the campaign, if you were running the Tories campaign this year, what would you have done differently?
I don't think I would have done too much differently. There are the obvious things. It's very easy to be clever in retrospect. You know, we can all get it right in retrospect. But I think that when we were announcing the social care policy, which I think in essence was right, we do have to take responsibility for ourselves, we should have nevertheless announced a cap at the same time as a floor. And then I think people would have been much more ready to contemplate it. So, I mean, I think there have been odd mistakes, but nothing like as huge as there have been in the other campaigns, I mean, the other parties. And so, no, I mean, I think she's run a moderately good campaign.
And in terms of the feeling that you've had on the doorstep then, mixed with the national picture, what do you think the result will be tomorrow?
Oh, I'm predicting a majority of 90.
4?
That is about as bright a question as Diane Abbott has asked.
And I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Ladies and gentlemen, Anne Widdecombe. Thank you. Well, the election campaign is almost over, and it's been as passionate as any that I've lived through. Elections are remembered not just for their outcomes, but for the events which unfold during them. This election was deliberately sabotaged by terrorists who wanted to disrupt the democratic process. But what they've done is achieve the complete opposite. Whatever the result tomorrow, we are more united.
At these times, we need to remember as Londoners more than we do at any other time that we need to stand together.
When times do get tough, we help each other out, and that's the Mancunian spirit.
I've never seen a city stand together like Manchester has last night, and I am a proud Manc right now.
We will stay strong, we will grow, and we'll be there for each other.
I refuse to have it change because 3 cowards sought to cause destruction.
A terrible thing happened, but it won't stop us from living our lives, really.
This city's for everybody, and we all need to rally round today to show support, because they want to divide us, don't they? They want us to turn on our neighbours, and it will never happen. Now here.
I plead with people not to be scared, not to be angry, because this is exactly what those people want us to feel. Go home, tell your friends, tell your family that they love them, and carry on doing exactly what you're doing.
That's all we've got time for this series. We'll be back soon, but for now, thank you to all our guests and all the guest musicians we've had in MP4. Our personal thanks to Theresa May for making this series possible, Jeremy Corben for making so many of the jokes possible, and Paul Nuttall for making television possible by inventing it in the first place. Thank you for watching, and remember you can vote between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. tomorrow. Now, to play us out, they're loud, but they've never blown a speaker. It's MP4.
It's the final countdown. Voting tomorrow. For some it's farewell, and maybe they'll come back, stand again and tell. I guess they've got no one to blame if they're left behind. Will things ever be the same again? It's the final countdown.